going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining today, everyone. This is the session on early career recruitment, the realities of today and a more equitable future. And I'm so happy that you chose to join me today for this session. I'm Shawn VanDerziel, the Executive Director of the National Association of Colleges and Employers. I've been with NACE since March the 26th, so right after the pandemic began. And formerly, I spent 23 years at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, where I served as the Chief Human Resources Officer and Chief of Staff. You may be wondering, what is NACE? NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and we are a membership association, and more specifically, a community of professionals focused on the development and employment of the college educated. And we provide a number of resources and strategies, benchmarks, research that helps this community to do the best they can in their particular jobs. We are made up of 13,000 members from across the world. And those 13,000 members come from 3,000 different organizations. 2,000 of those organizations are colleges and universities. And 1,000 of them are companies, and those corporations are mostly representative of very large corporations of an average of around 20,000 employees. Of those 13,000 members, 10,000 of them work on college campuses where they provide career development services for their college campuses and for those students, bridging the world of higher education to the world of work. And then 3,000 of those members work for those companies who recruit on college campuses new talent into their companies. So with that background, I want to just cover with you what we'll cover today in this session. I'm going to lay out the general landscape of college recruitment, particularly as it's been impacted by the COVID-19. We'll then dive into diversity and equity and what's happening in this space, and particularly as a bridge of talent and particularly untapped talent, which certainly relates to the tech industry in general. And then we'll talk about closing the whole gap together. Let's start with the landscape. So there are about 11 million students that are enrolled at the bachelor's degree level. And over the last year or so, about 3.9 million degrees were granted. Of those, 1.9 million were bachelor's degrees. So close to 2 million of those 3.9 are bachelor's degrees. And then another close to 1 million are associate degree graduates. That's going to be important in a little bit, so I hope you'll remember those numbers. We'll come back around to it. What we learned during COVID, what happened during COVID for college graduates. The class of 2020, those students who had jobs lined up prior to graduation, there were some rescinding of offers. This is a good news and a bad news story, because 7% of offers were rescinded at that time. The other way to look at it is only 7% of offers were rescinded, comparatively to how the rest of employment was going around the US. That actually is a fairly good news item. Of those that did begin employment, employers were delaying their actual start dates. So those start dates were being delayed by about 1/3 of employers, anywhere between about a month to 6 months in length. And so some employees are even just now getting started. The average was more around the 3-month mark. Currently, or in the month of August, there was a 13% unemployment among young college graduates. So meaning those who hold bachelor's degrees that are in their early 20s, there was a 13% unemployment rate, which compares to 7% from last year. So it's about double what it was last year. So clearly a significant increase. But this particular group certainly has not been hit as hard as other parts of our population, and particularly those who don't have college education. We all know that internships are a gateway to future employment. We're going to talk a bit about this today, but I wanted to provide you with how internships were impacted by COVID as a starting point. So those students who had internships lined up before COVID was all there, about 20% of those offers were rescinded. So that was a bad news item. About 20% were rescinded because those employers did not know how to help those students to fulfill that internship in a virtual environment, and because they were going virtual. Of the internships that did go forward, about close to half of them were made virtual. And so this was a whole new experience for everyone that everyone needed to adjust to, and new ways of working with interns that had never been done before. Also, of those that went forward with their internships, about 41% of them reduced the length of the actual internship. So typically an internship during the summer months is around 8 to 10 weeks long. What we found was that some employers reduced them down to 2 weeks, up to about 6 weeks in length. The average was probably right there around the 4 to 6 week mark for most of those large employers that continued on with their internship programs. What's going to be really interesting is to see how successful this really was from a pipeline perspective, because most employers that have internship programs use them for their pipeline. And so what they're really doing is they're putting their new recruits to test. They're seeing if these are individuals that they would like to bring on board full time. And so we'll see if this translated well in the virtual environment, just as it does in the in-person environment. We also know that virtual recruiting was accelerated dramatically. That's probably not a new news item to any of us in this session today, but it does have a number of pretty dramatic impacts to the populations who are being recruited and to those recruiters who are doing the recruiting, because it was really very new. Most people were used to doing a hybrid situation, a little bit of the high-tech virtual recruitment, marrying that with in-person. So in-person interviews and other kinds of high-touch points that just isn't happening right now and wasn't happening over the summer months. There are a lot of learnings that are going to come out of this that will be applied going forward. And the prediction really is that virtual recruitment at the level at which it's at today is here to stay and will probably continue to be accelerated pretty dramatically. We're just finishing up our job outlook survey of employers in our membership. And so preliminarily, I thought I'd share with you the high level results from that, which is to say that it looks like overall, as an aggregate, the class of 2021 will be recruited at about the same level as the class of 2020, a little bit down, less than 1% down. However, there are some caveats to that. There are a couple of industries that are really propelling that number because they're in high growth spaces and they're doing really well right now. And those are software engineering and food and beverage manufacturing. And so that's really pulling the numbers up. About a third of the employers in our survey actually said that their recruitment will be down and will be down significantly from the class of 2020 and will be closer to the days of the 2009-2010 recession. So it's a mixed bag story. And for students, my advice really is be flexible in your job search. Those of you graduating in 2021, there are going to be jobs out there, but you'll need to be flexible about how you apply your skills, how you apply your competencies towards different kinds of jobs and potentially in different kinds of industries than what you originally thought you might be looking at. Let's turn to diversity and inclusion because this is a really important topic, not just today, but in general, and the statistics will really bear themselves out, I think, as you look at these. We know from companies that it is really important, diversity and inclusion. Pre-pandemic, 80% of CEOs were saying that they were building new systems, particularly in their leadership pipeline, to work on diversity and inclusion. And a vast majority saw inclusion as being one of their top 3 priorities for their employees. What we have found in a recent survey of our employers, and this was just over the last month, we found that the vast majority of our employers were committed to anti-racism and committed to improving diversity, equity, and inclusion within their companies. Most companies are starting with diversity hiring, but what we're finding is that it's going to be a slow go in terms of companies really looking at their internal policies, procedures, and systems that support a diverse population. So changes that need to occur for retention purposes are probably going to happen a little bit more slowly. And the priority is going to be placed on the hiring process of diverse candidates. It's the chicken or the egg proverbial story. And it looks like in this case, the hiring cycle is the one that's going to lead. With the Black Lives Matter movement and anti-racism movement that has really accelerated, we're finding that there really is a prioritization. And what that means is that there's going to be more support for Black students on college campuses and supporting them in their job search strategy and preparation strategies. With that increase in diverse hiring, we need to really look at equity in terms of pay and promotion. This also means that we're seeing and will continue to see an expansion and creation of new workforce development programs to mentor and be a bridge between those educational systems and the world of work. And we're going to see a whole host of new and enhanced technologies for recruitment in this space, and particularly AI. We know AI is built by people, and so there are flaws as that machine learning happens. And so we need to take a look at built-in biases that may be there in those recruitment technologies, and folks are working on it and working really hard to break down those barriers and biases that may be built in. Now, earlier I explained that there were 11 million students enrolled at the bachelor's degree level. Now, that's a 1% decline over the year prior. For this September, the numbers still aren't in totality, but experts are predicting that enrollment will be down another 2.5% this year. So that means there is a decline in those graduating with bachelor's degrees. I want to present the next part as maybe a solution to that, which is that 37% of the core college age population in the United States are Black or Hispanic. However, only 24% of those receiving bachelor's degrees are Black or Hispanic. So they are disproportionately represented in enrollments at the bachelor's degree level. There certainly is room for improvement, which will certainly increase the employment pipeline. There are disparities in hiring and internships, and this is showing up in our research. I thought this might be interesting for you to take a deep dive into. Overall, according to BLS, there's a 13% unemployment rate among those in the traditional age bachelor degree holders, so in their 20s. That doesn't really tell the full story. If you're Hispanic or you're Black, the unemployment rate is dramatically higher currently. If you're white, it's lower currently. And then let's take a look at internships. Again, internships being a gateway to full-time employment. What we've found in our research is that there are disparities in how internships play themselves out based upon race. There are other characteristics that there are disparities in as well. So for instance, women and with first generation students, first generation college students. But I'm going to take one example, which would be Black students. They are disproportionately represented as paid interns. So they're underrepresented as a proportion of paid interns. They are overrepresented, so disproportionately, as paid interns and those that have never interned. That's not a good news story. And that stands true for Hispanic students, for women, and for first generation students as well. I'm going to explain why that's so important here in just a second. Again, driving home the point that internships are the gateway to full-time employment, students with paid internships receive nearly 50% more job offers than those that are unpaid or never interned to begin with. So you can see from this graph those dramatic results. I'm going to take it one step further. If I'm a paid intern and I receive a job offer upon graduation, I can expect to be paid about $10,000 more in my entry salary than my peers who either didn't intern at all or had an unpaid internship. So let's piece all of this together. Black students are underrepresented as a proportion of paid internships, which means that they will receive less offers upon graduation, which also means that they will be paid less upon graduation. However, there's plenty of talent out there that is diverse, that's Black, that's Hispanic, first generation, that are women, that deserve equal opportunities moving forward. So this is a pipeline that we must work on together to ensure our future. One way to close some of the gaps that are happening both with tech talent, with diverse talent in general, is to think about the student career readiness and what happens in that process. When Lumina Foundation did a survey of chief academic officers, they found that 96% of them said that their graduates are prepared for the world of work. When they asked a similar question to business leaders, they found that they said only 11% of them said that graduates have the competencies and skills required for their company and their workforce. That's a pretty dramatic disconnect. So how do we bridge that? Well, I would say to you, one way to do that is through ensuring that students have the competencies through their education that will prepare them for their careers. We've come up with what we call career readiness competencies. There are many models like this out there, and some schools have put them together themselves based upon their population, and certainly companies should be looking at this individually for various jobs that they have and for their companies as a whole. What are those competencies that are required for successful employees in any particular environment? So we've done a lot of research around this, and these are the current ones that we have. We're also on to the next generation of these competencies that will be released sometime later this fall, early winter. And they will be fairly similar, but there will be some tweaks to it. Interestingly enough, when we talk with employers about what they're doing in the hiring process, we find that the top 3 things that they look at when they're screening and they're looking for new employees is GPA, problem-solving skills, and communication skills. So they're saying problem-solving skills and communication skills are vitally important. They're the top. But GPA is still being used as an indicator of success. And in fact, about 3/4 of employers don't even measure or don't look at problem-solving skills or communication skills of their candidates until the GPA requirement has been fulfilled. So if I don't have the 3.0, I don't even get to demonstrate my problem-solving skills and communication skills. I would question, why are we looking at GPA first? Is that the accurate measurement by which to select employees for particular jobs? When we take a look at what students say about their own proficiency in various competencies, we also see that there's a disconnect with what employers see in those same groups of students. So the example I would give you would be global and intercultural fluency. About a quarter of employers say that the students are proficient. 3/4 say that they're not. And students, just over a third of students, however, say they are proficient. So there's a disconnect. Another really big disconnect is under professionalism and work ethic. So employers say that students do not have the work ethic or professionalism in their entry-level position for the workforce. But students say, I'm more than prepared, I'm ready, I got this, at 88%. So we've got to work on this together, and particularly in the higher education system, to bridge this together. So how do you bridge it? Well, there certainly are grassroots efforts that are happening, and then there are comprehensive approaches that are going on as well. So many people are working on this. They're putting a lot of goodwill towards it and talking about it and trying to put together some initial individual initiatives to make headway related to this. But really the only way we're ever going to make this happen is through a comprehensive approach, figuring out what it is we're trying to measure, where we're trying to get to, and making sure that we're aligning the resources, the skills, and the outcomes all together. And we can work on this together, bridging it between employers and higher education. There are a lot of things that employers can do. They can really measure those successful employees that they have to figure out what those competencies are that those employees have that would be indicators for future successful employees. They can instill those skills and competencies into job descriptions, into performance reviews, and then into the interview process itself. Higher education can work across its ecosystem, particularly with staff, the faculty, and academics, to ensure that what employers need is being infused into the curriculum and through all that a student may touch upon in their experience at university. So whether that be student activities, leadership, student employment, internship, and key to this all is language. What it appears to be happening is that there's a language barrier, and there's an inability of students to be able to translate their experiences that they've had. So whether it be leadership experiences, problem-solving experiences through coursework, part-time employment, internship experiences, to be able to translate that for employers when they go to seek that job. So translating it into resume language, translating it into interview language, and being able to recognize their own skills and abilities when they read a job description to know whether they're really qualified or not. When in fact, those students may very well have those competencies and skills. They're just not speaking the same language or aren't able to communicate it effectively. And so we need to be working and making that bridge across both systems of employment and higher education together. If we do all of this, we will really make a change. There really is a collective call to action. We can bridge this talent divide, this what we think is a talent shortage. There is talent out there. We've got to figure out how to bring it together and to do it in a really smart way. And along the way, what we will be doing is mitigating disparities that exist that are currently negatively impacting marginalized populations and students. We need to really transform our internship experiences and those outcomes for those marginalized students. There's a lot of room for improvement there. We need to reshape that student engagement and experience across the higher education system to better meet the demands of the workforce. We need to redesign that candidate experience and think about what we're measuring, why we're measuring it, and what we're really trying to get to. And use competencies and skills to really bridge many of these gaps that exist, because they really can level the playing field and provide for a more fruitful future for both employers as well as for those future employees. I'm going to stop there. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me for the session. I hope there were some good takeaways for you. I would also be more than happy to answer any questions that you have, so feel free to ask questions in our various chat formats, and we'll go through those. I hope you'll visit our booth in the virtual space. There's additional information there about NACE that you can engage in. And I also hope that you'll link in with me on LinkedIn, and where I share a lot of this kind of information publicly, and you can learn that way as well.
So Shawn, it's been an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. This is Allison Dietz, and I'm monitoring the Q&A here in the Whova app, as well as the comment section. But one thing, this topic is so near and dear to me, and one thing that I would love to hear your take on is, as you mentioned, professionalism, work ethic. That's the area where students need the most help. Where can they learn that besides, you know, maybe a summer job or an internship? Do you have any insight to where you see the biggest experience that produces the biggest gain in that competency?
It is the hands-on experience that provides the greatest gain with that competency. And that's why those internship experiences are so vitally important. So whether they be job shadow experiences, they be micro internships, they be full internships, they're vitally important to that lifeline of full-time work, so that those students can receive the feedback that they need to be ready for that next position. So the feedback is what's really important. It's one thing to see professionalism in action, but it's another thing to have someone coaching you and mentoring you through it. And so those are the most meaningful ways, I believe.
Great answer. Thank you. We did have a question come in, and I couldn't agree more. Fascinating statistics, especially in regards to the makeup of students and their ethnicity and salary information. Are there any hiring organizations that you can recommend that employers can turn to for maybe offering, you know, a more proactive hiring of those underrepresented populations?
That's a really great question. I think, you know, one of the things to do from an employer perspective is to really partner with those universities and colleges, because they can work with you and they can help you to understand who it is that you're targeting and how to help to get you to where you're going. But you've also got to understand those universities and colleges that you're going to, and you need to understand what their population is. And there are a number of ways that you can do that, and those numbers are publicly available. And so, for instance, we produce reports through NACE that can help with that, but there are many other organizations that can do that as well to help you understand where are students of color, where are students, what programs are they enrolled in, what programs are they graduating from, so that you can do a little better targeting that way. But also there are a number of organizations that are built that are built for the sole purpose of mentorship and helping with the pipeline. And so I would ask you to do some web searching for some of these organizations, but an example I would give you would be one that we work with at NACE called Inroads. And Inroads works very specifically with marginalized populations, and they help them from their high school experience all the way through the employment experience and following them. And they're particularly interested in the STEM fields. And so what they want to do is to ensure that those students are successful all the way through. They know that the key is internships. So they work with those students and work with the colleges, campuses that they're on, and the employers to help to bring it all together to make sure that those students are receiving those experiences and then have opportunity to be exposed to employers upon graduation. And so there are a number of those kinds of programs that are out there, and I would encourage you to exploit them because that's what they're there for.
Excellent. Yes, I'm very familiar with Inroads. I agree. It's a great organization. So thank you for that. We're getting close to time. So I want to just kind of put out there sort of last call for any additional questions. We'd love to hear from Shawn again. He's an expert, and this is just wonderful to have him here today at Prepare.ai. So we'll just see if there's any last minute questions that come in from the chat. Well, I do have one last question, and it might be a little bit of a hot topic. I know it is in our office. You mentioned behavioral interviewing and aligning interviews to competencies. What are your thoughts on case interviews? There are certain industries that, continue to use case interviewing. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share with this group on that topic?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is you always want, my tact is you always want to bring the best out of people. So when you're doing an interview, whatever that situation is if you really want to know who that person is, try to get the best out of them. And so if you have challenges in front of a person that seem like challenges in an interview situation or seem daunting, you're not going to bring the best out of somebody. So it's going to be vitally important how you are perceived as the interviewer and the company. And if you really want the best candidate, you need to ask questions that are going to be based upon past experiences and not necessarily hypothetical questions of what could happen. At the point at which you're asking hypothetical questions, I don't know that anybody knows the answer to the hypothetical work situation until you're actually in it, until you understand the culture of that organization, you understand the problem-solving procedures in that organization, you understand the values of that organization, and every organization is different. So my personal feeling is that if the case study is to ask a hypothetical question, I think that's a very difficult thing to put in front of a candidate. You'd much rather learn about the candidate. You'll get a much better understanding of the candidate based upon their past experiences than you will about the hypothetical. Hope that made sense. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that was right on, and
Okay.
I personally agree with you wholeheartedly. So thank you for answering that for our participants and for future participants. So I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please don't forget to go to the exhibitor hall, check out the NACE booth, and before our final closing keynote speaker. So thank you so much, and everyone have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the conference. Thanks, Shawn.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you.